Hello, everyone. I'm real glad to be here with you today. Thanks for hosting me. I'll start my presentation. The topic is how long to stay, when to return, gendered labor migration from Georgia. First of all, about outline, I'll start very briefly about the country. Then I'll speak about the goal, task, and the subject of the research. I'll expand then about the methodology and theoretical basis, and then introduce main findings. And finally, I'll conclude. I would like to express my gratitude to donors of my research. I started my research in 2015. It was a Fulbright program, and I was eligible to conduct in-person interviews with Georgian labor migrants in New York City and other states of the United States. Many thanks to the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences of Tbilisi State University for supporting my project in 2016, and many special gratitude to the EU-funded Erasmus Plus program. Now, about the country, very briefly, Georgia is the country that is situated in the Caucasus region, and particularly in the South Caucasus. The northern neighbor of the country is Russia, the southern neighbor is Turkey. To the east, we have two neighbors, Armenia and Azerbaijan, and to the west, the country is washed by the Black Sea. The population is up to 3.7 million people, and it's situated at the square of the country is up to 70,000 square kilometers. During the Soviet period, Georgian people were not distinguished with high mobility, and according to the last census in 1989, there were more than 95% of Georgia's population lived in Georgian SSR. However, after the dissolution of the Soviet Empire, the process of exodus took place, and new type of families formed. These are transnational families. About them I would like to speak today. And transnationalism is a lifestyle or strategy of survival and betterment by immigrant and transnational migrants span two countries over the geographical borders, and the main purpose of them to support financial of their families. Now about the goal, task, and the task objectives of my research. The purpose of the research is to highlight how the Georgian transnational household operates in geographically different places and what is their coping strategy, and also and how they distribute income diversification in the context of changed gender roles. The main objective is to identify economic benefits and social loss or social costs. The target audience is the Georgian transnational family in Georgia and in the countries of immigration. And the main limitation, I would like to underline this issue. What was the main limitation for our research? Actually, from the beginning, we started to cooperate with more than 60 families. However, our respondents finally turned out to be only 23 transnational families. And what was the reason for it? Our methodology is quite is a novelty, absolutely novel approach. We decided to conduct in-depth interviews, and to use this qualitative method is research with members of the transnational family with spouses. It was quite difficult because even though that we have permission, for example, when I was a Fulbright scholar in 2015 at Rutgers University, I had an RB application, so-called RB application, that was issued by the Rutgers University. It was official document that allowed me to interview people, because the questions are very personally, and you you penetrate their personal life. So it is very sensitive issue. That's why when we started to talk with our potential respondents. Many husbands, many male respondents refused to participate in the research. So it was a big challenge for us. That's why the number of our respondents were 23 couples only, because those husbands who were totally dependent financially on their wives, totally dependent on remittances from the immigration country, they refused to participate in the research. It was like they considered that it was like stigma for them. As a research tool, three types of discussion plans were used: one for expert and two other discussion plans for spouses, separately for wife and separately for husbands. We refer to a theoretical basis. This is the micro theory of new economics of labor migration, so-called NELM theory, and the concept of transnationalism that was started by Nina Gilchiller and her colleagues. According to NELM, this theory foresees a family as a key decision maker in order to prevent or to avoid risks. This can be risks from economic issues, maybe from natural disaster, and so on and so on. As for transnational approach, Nina Gilchiller and her colleagues started to speak about it from the beginning of 1990s. And what they indicate, what they argue, is that older migrants, immigrants break off all homeland social relations, and they were eager to be totally integrated in the whole society. So they usually you lose their ethnic identity or language or culture or tradition and so on and so on. By contrast, today's immigrants, they are quite active and they show very vividly themselves. And what is most important, the whole society accepts them. The whole society accepts their traditions, their culture, to demonstrate their identity, to say so. In this way, migrants build so-called social fields, according to Thomas Feist, or social spaces. And there are many spaces. We see cultural, economic space, religious space, or some other kind of spaces. This map shows very active immigration processes from the South Caucasus region with three republics, Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. And that started after the dissolution of the Soviet Empire from the beginning of 1990s. However, on the map, we see that this process started even before the collapse of the Soviet Union. Since 1988, it was the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan over then Nagorno-Karabakh. The conflict is over today, but very soon after dissolution, as I mentioned already, of the Soviet Empire, many people, first of all, ethnic minority groups, left the country. I speak now about Georgia. Also, they were followed by native Georgians, and here are some figures from the official statistics website of Georgia that shows that during the several decades, recent decades, Georgia maintains permanent negative net migration rate. Here you see the trend since 2013. However, I would like to mention that this trend we have since 1990s. And here are only two positive figures, two positive indicators in 2020 and 2022. In 2020, this is due to a COVID pandemic because many migrants temporarily returned to Georgia due to COVID pandemic, and that's why we have positive net migration rate. And in 2022, this is the result of war between Russia and Ukraine. When Russia invaded Ukraine, many Russians arrived in Georgia. Those people who escaped mobilization in their country, and they stayed for several times. Well, For today, many of them left Georgia, and that's why, in 2022 we have positive net migration. However, in 2023 we have again negative net migration. Now, I mentioned about the immigration spaces, and what is the most important, the real space. This is according to Polish geographer Iashvili. He identifies three types of spaces in tourism realm. However, we can transform his concept about the social spaces in immigration studies, and he identifies a real space for our
2 minutes, okay? Just 2 minutes, okay?
Okay,
Thank you.
2 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Oh,
you.
sorry about it.
It's okay.
Okay, this space is the labor realm for our immigrants, and here we see I have put chart that shows remittances that immigrants are sent usually to the country. However, here are two figures. In 2022, Georgia receives more than $4 billion. That is not real figures because those Russian people who arrived from Russian Federation to Georgia, they moved their businesses and financial capital to Georgia, and that's why we have such a high figures. And this map was created by my colleague that shows top countries from which Georgian people receive remittances. Again, this figure for Russia is not real because it is included those finances that were transferred by Russian people. However, the main countries from which Georgian people, transnational families receive remittances is the United States, is Germany, Greece, and Italy as well. However, not if we speak about the social spaces, Georgian people managed to create cultural spaces like in New York City, for example, Georgian Theater or Cultural Center, and so on and so on. I'm not going to read these quotations. Nonetheless, what Georgian immigrants like, this is the familial environment, and this is the most important issue. The split of a nuclear family is the great challenge for the Georgian society and for transnational families. And I would like to underline that in many cases, in many situations, Georgian case goes in line with Nelm theory. However, at the point that we have a very long period of Georgian immigrants, especially women immigrants, stay in the destination country. This goes beyond the limits of Nelm theory. And as we know, the migration process is a gendered process, and the main drivers of this process are Georgian women.
Conclude, please.
So very soon, migration is a complex issue, and long-term separation is identified as the social loss, and what is the main benefits for Georgian family is the economic well-being. Finally, I can conclude that these married, educated, working, and reproductive age migrant women straight between home and whole society. They are neoliberal mothers, and they are the members of post-communist society. Applying a transnational framework, our research sheds light in which the family is a socio-economic, gender-rich, and emotional entity undergoes transformation that is also the part of the globalization. So this is one of the great challenges that we face in our society for today. Thank you.